Welcome to Books and More, the channel where powerful ideas from great books are transformed into clear, engaging insights for your life and financial future. In today's video, we explore Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver by Mike Maloney, a remarkable book that reveals how money really works, why modern currencies are at risk, and how gold and silver can protect your wealth in uncertain times. This is more than a guide to investing, it's a roadmap for financial freedom. Subscribe to Books and More for more summaries that inspire smarter thinking and stronger decisions. Preface: Why we must understand money, gold, and silver. In the preface of Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver, I share a personal journey, one that led me from being an ordinary businessman to someone obsessed with uncovering the truth about money. I explained that this book is not simply designed to help readers get rich. Instead, it was written to help people truly understand something most of us were never taught. The monetary system we rely on every day is fragile, risky, and built on mechanisms the average person knows almost nothing about. I emphasize that today's global economy rests on fiat currencies, money not backed by anything real, created through debt and unlimited printing. History shows that such systems always follow the same cycle: a rapid expansion of credit, asset bubbles, collapse, and eventual reset. And in every one of those collapses, real assets like gold and silver have served as a lifeboat. They are not merely precious metals, they are real money, holding their value across centuries and across every financial model humans have ever invented. I explained that my interest in precious metals didn't come from chasing profit, but from recognizing patterns. I watched the dot-com bubble, the housing crisis, and the endless expansion of debt by governments around the world. All of it pointed to one conclusion: whenever people lose trust in the currency printed by their governments, they return to gold and silver. This preface sets the foundation for the entire book by showing why history is the golden key to understanding the future. I describe how shocked I was when I realized that great civilizations, from ancient China to Rome to Weimar Germany, collapsed after debasing their currency. The technology and the times may differ, but the underlying law remains the same. When money is diluted, people become poorer, and gold and silver rise sharply in value. I highlight a crucial idea: gold and silver do not change in price, currencies lose value. This simple shift in perspective helps readers understand the financial world with far more clarity. With a calm but urgent tone, I tell readers that this book does not aim to stir fear, but to prepare them for an uncertain future through knowledge, understanding, and awareness. The preface also reveals the broader purpose of the book: not to push readers into buying metals blindly, but to help them build a firm foundation in monetary history, economic cycles, and the nature of real versus artificial wealth. Once you understand these principles, you can make wise decisions and protect your family from financial shocks. And finally, I admit something directly. If someone wants to jump straight into buying precious metals, they can read Part 4 first. But if they want to understand why gold and silver matter, not just how to buy them, then they should read from start to finish. Because only through understanding can we see beyond the illusions of modern money and build a financial future that is secure, resilient, and grounded in reality. Part 1: The Timeless Pattern of Money and Power. In Part 1, I invite you to travel back through history, not for the sake of nostalgia, but because the past contains the clearest map of our financial future. Everything happening in the world today has happened before. Civilizations rise and fall, currencies are born and destroyed, economies flourish and crumble. And at the center of it all, hidden behind wars, political shifts, and social change, lies a single engine: the monetary system. To understand where we are going, you must understand where money has been. And history shows again and again that when governments are given the power to manipulate money, the ending is always the same. I begin by describing what I call the battle of the ages, a constant struggle between real value and artificial value. Throughout human history, people have relied on gold and silver because they represent something governments cannot fake: scarcity, durability, universal recognition. These metals evolved naturally into money because they could not be created out of thin air. But as civilizations grew, rulers realized that controlling the money supply was the most powerful form of control. Instead of earning wealth, they discovered they could extract it by diluting the currency. This temptation has repeated in every empire, from Rome to China to modern nations. To illustrate this, I take you back to ancient Rome. For centuries, the Roman denarius was made of nearly pure silver. Soldiers were paid in it, merchants trusted it, ordinary citizens saved it. But as Rome expanded, its costs ballooned: wars, bureaucracy, corruption. Instead of raising taxes or reducing spending, emperors quietly reduced the silver content of the currency. They printed the same coin, but with less and less precious metal inside. Prices soared, trust eroded. Eventually, the economy fractured and the empire collapsed under its own weight. And this pattern did not stop at Rome. In ancient China, successive dynasties followed the same playbook: print more money, dilute the metal content, trigger inflation, and lose the mandate of heaven. In Weimar Germany, the printing press destroyed the currency entirely. And in Zimbabwe, it happened again in our lifetime. But here is what I want readers to see. The problem is never the paper itself. The problem is human nature. Once a government discovers it can create money simply by decree, the temptation to overuse that power becomes irresistible. Printing money is politically painless, far easier than telling citizens, "We cannot afford this," or "taxes must rise." And so the system drifts into debt, then into crisis, then into collapse. Next, I turn to the United States, the modern example of this ancient cycle. After World War II, the U.S. dollar became the anchor of the global economy through the Bretton Woods system. Foreign currencies were tied to the dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold. It was a stable system as long as the U.S. honored the promise not to create dollars faster than it held gold. But by the 1960s, America faced soaring costs from war and government programs. The printing presses began to run. Nations like France noticed this and demanded gold in exchange for their dollars, as they were legally entitled to do. The gold drained quickly, and in 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. From that moment forward, the dollar and every other major currency on earth became pure fiat money, backed by nothing but trust. This moment was more important than most people realize. It marked the beginning of a new era, a global experiment in unlimited money. Governments could now print without restraint. Banks could create credit without limit. The supply of money began growing exponentially. Asset prices soared. Debt became the engine of economic growth. And the financial system slowly drifted away from the real world, away from production, savings, and discipline, toward a world supported entirely by promises. In this section, I also explain the natural cycle of booms and busts. Every financial bubble in history, from tulips to railroads to the dot-com era, has the same DNA. It begins with easy money. When money is cheap and plentiful, people make poor decisions. They speculate, they borrow excessively, they ignore risk. And as money flows into assets, prices rise, creating the illusion of prosperity. But once the illusion breaks, the bubble bursts. And each time, the collapse wipes out the wealth of those who trusted artificial value instead of real value. However, throughout every collapse, one thing remains constant: gold and silver survive. They are not merely assets, they are truth. They expose the weakness of paper money. When currencies lose purchasing power, gold and silver appear to rise, but in reality, they are simply revealing the decline of the currency. That is why I repeatedly emphasize, gold and silver do not change, only the value of paper changes. As Part 1 progresses, I show that we are living in the latest phase of this historical pattern. Governments are drowning in debt. Central banks have become the creators of money rather than guardians of stability. Economies have become dependent on stimulus, credit expansion, and artificially low interest rates. We are repeating the same errors that destroyed past empires, but on a larger scale, with global coordination and with far greater fragility. I close part 1 with a message I want every reader to absorb. We have been here before. Not once, not twice, but dozens of times throughout history. We are not inside a new story. We are inside the oldest story of all. And every chapter of that story ends the same way. When paper money reaches the end of its cycle, gold and silver return as the foundation of trust and value. Understanding yesterday is how we prepare for tomorrow. Because when the monetary system begins to shake, as it already has, those who understand history will recognize the signals. And those who act early, who position themselves in real assets, will not merely survive the next transition, they will come out stronger on the other side. Part 2. Today, the perfect storm of the modern financial world. In Part 2, I ask readers to stop looking backward for a moment and instead pay close attention to the world we live in right now. Because everything we learned from history is not just theory, it is unfolding again, in real time, right in front of us. If Part 1 demonstrated that every fiat currency eventually fails, then Part 2 reveals the uncomfortable truth. The currencies of today are heading down that same path, and the signs are clearer than ever. I begin by asking a fundamental question: what is money worth today? It might seem obvious, but most people have never questioned it. They work, earn, save, and spend without stopping to realize that the very foundation of their financial lives, the currency in their bank accounts, is slowly being devalued. Modern money does not hold value because of anything tangible. It holds value because we collectively agree to pretend it does. It is backed by confidence, not by assets. And confidence is the most fragile support structure imaginable. We live in an era where all major currencies, the dollar, the euro, the yen, the pound, are issued without restraint. They are not tied to gold, silver, or anything of objective value. They are created through debt, and that debt grows exponentially every year. Governments spend more than they earn, households borrow more than they can repay, and corporations leverage themselves to the limit. Everything is built on credit and promises. And when a system depends entirely on promises, it becomes vulnerable to a single force: the erosion of trust. One of the key warnings I present in this section is the global debt explosion. Debt is the dark cloud hanging over the world economy. Nations owe more than they can ever repay. Central banks manipulate interest rates to keep debts affordable, but each manipulation pushes the system further from reality. Ordinary people don't see the danger because debt has become normalized. Student loans, car loans, credit cards, mortgages, corporate bonds, government deficits. But the truth is simple: debt is a claim on the future, and the future is finite. Yet our debt levels grow as if the future is infinite. To sustain this mountain of debt, governments and central banks rely on their favorite tool. They call it quantitative easing, stimulus, or liquidity injections, but the result is always the same: more money chasing the same amount of goods. I emphasize that printing money does not create wealth, it dilutes wealth. It makes every dollar already in existence worth less. This is why everything feels more expensive: housing, energy, food, healthcare, education. People believe prices are rising, but what's really happening is that the currency is losing purchasing power. Inflation is not an accident. It is a built-in feature of a system that depends on endless money creation. Politicians like inflation because it hides the true cost of their spending. Central banks tolerate inflation because it erodes debt over time. But for ordinary people, inflation is silent theft. It steals value from savings, it punishes responsible behavior, and it rewards those closest to the money printing process: banks, governments, and large financial institutions. In this section, I also describe what I call the perfect economic storm, a convergence of forces that make today's financial system more fragile than anything seen in history. These forces include unprecedented global debt, artificially low interest rates, aggressive money printing, inflated asset markets, a banking system fractured by leverage, and a public largely unaware of the risks. Each one of these forces is dangerous on its own. Together, they form a storm with the potential to reshape the entire global economy. A critical theme of Part 2 is the idea that markets today no longer reflect true value. Stock markets rise not because companies are truly stronger, but because cheap money floods into financial instruments. Real estate prices soar, not because homes have inherently become more valuable, but because investors seek a place to park rapidly deteriorating currency. And governments encourage this behavior because it creates the illusion of prosperity. But illusions do not last forever. I direct readers to look at what always happens when a fiat system approaches its end. Volatility increases, banking crises appear, governments lose control of interest rates, and ordinary citizens begin to feel uncertainty even if they cannot explain why. Signs of this are everywhere today. Banks struggle with liquidity, currencies fluctuate wildly, and major nations quietly accumulate gold, a signal that confidence in the current system is weakening. This leads naturally to the role of gold and silver in the modern world. I explain that these metals act as the financial world's truth detector. When confidence declines, gold and silver rise. They are not rising because they change, they rise because the currency falls. Gold and silver expose the weakness of the system. They are the final refuge when trust evaporates. In addition to gold, Part 2 gives special attention to silver, a metal often underestimated. Silver is both a monetary metal and an industrial one. It is used in electronics, solar panels, medical devices, and countless technologies that define the modern world. Silver has the unique dual role of being essential to industry and simultaneously serving as a safe haven asset. And while gold is hoarded by central banks, silver is consumed at a pace that reduces global reserves. This combination makes silver an extraordinary opportunity in a world heading toward monetary instability. Throughout this part, I highlight a key point. We are living inside the largest monetary experiment in human history. No civilization has ever run the entire world on fiat currency simultaneously. Never before have all major central banks printed money in coordination. Never before has global debt surpassed global GDP many times over. And never before have people placed so much faith in digital numbers that can vanish with a policy error, a banking failure, or a loss of confidence. The system has reached a point where small shocks can cause large tremors. A single major default, an unexpected spike in interest rates, or a currency crisis in one major nation can cascade across the global system. Just as in nature, stress accumulates gradually and is released suddenly. Part 2 concludes with a warning and a call to awareness. I tell readers that today is not stable, even if it appears to be. The world's financial structure is stretched thin. Governments are out of tools. Central banks are trapped between inflation and collapse. Markets are addicted to cheap money. And every historical indicator suggests that the current system is nearing a turning point. But the message is not one of fear. It is one of preparation. Because while fiat currencies always fail, those who recognize the signs early can protect themselves. Gold and silver remain the most reliable storehouses of purchasing power the world has ever known. And in the storm that is coming, they will once again serve as the anchor of stability. Part 2 is meant to help readers understand today clearly, to remove illusions, see the vulnerabilities, and realize that the decisions they make now will determine how they emerge from the next great monetary transition. You do not need to predict the exact moment of the storm. You only need to understand that it is gathering, and that understanding is the first step toward building real financial security. Part 3. Tomorrow. The Great Wealth Transfer of the 21st Century. In Part 3, I ask you to lift your eyes from the present and look toward the horizon, because understanding tomorrow is just as important as understanding yesterday and today. If Part 1 revealed the repeating patterns of monetary history, and Part 2 exposed the fragile condition of our current financial system, then Part 3 brings those two insights together to show where the world is heading next. What we are approaching is not a small adjustment, not a minor shift, but the largest transfer of wealth you will see in your lifetime, a transfer that always occurs when a monetary system reaches the end of its cycle. I begin with the image of a pendulum, a metaphor that captures the natural movements of money and value across time. For centuries, the pendulum has swung between two poles, real money and paper promises. When societies are disciplined and governments act responsibly, real money, gold and silver, holds its rightful place at the center of commerce. But as time passes, political pressure grows, debts accumulate, and the temptation to manipulate money becomes irresistible. The pendulum begins swinging toward paper, fiat currency, credit expansion, and financial illusions. Eventually, the illusions break down, confidence evaporates, and the pendulum swings violently back toward real assets. This is where great fortunes are gained or lost, and this, I believe, is exactly where we stand today. Throughout history, every major economic upheaval has been accompanied by a shift in what people trust. When citizens lose faith in their currency, when banks shake, when governments stretch themselves too thin, they instinctively return to tangible value. And at the top of that hierarchy stand gold and silver. These metals do not rise out of speculation or fashion. They rise because the monetary system around them collapses. They rise because they reflect truth when everything else is distorted. I explain that we are now in the final stages of a long-term global experiment with fiat money. For decades, governments have expanded the money supply far beyond reason, pushing debt, credit, and financial risk to unprecedented levels. This expansion created booms in stocks, real estate, and bonds, booms that made people feel wealthy, even though their wealth was built on unstable ground. But every system built on borrowed time eventually reaches its breaking point, and today's monetary system is more stretched than any in history. As I describe the coming transition, I emphasize that it will not be a slow, gentle adjustment. Monetary resets rarely are. They tend to happen quickly, sometimes overnight, triggered by a crisis of confidence, a major default, a banking collapse, or a sudden loss of control by central banks. The world has become interconnected to such a degree that a shock in one major economy can ripple across continents in hours. The pendulum no longer swings quietly, it swings with global force. Part 3 also explores the idea that gold and silver do not simply preserve wealth during these transitions, they multiply purchasing power. In the aftermath of monetary breakdowns, real assets become incredibly cheap relative to gold and silver. Homes, land, businesses, and productive assets can be bought for a fraction of their former cost, not because they lose value, but because paper currency collapses while gold and silver remain stable. This is the central opportunity I want readers to understand. Metals are not just protection, they are positioning. They allow you to move off the sinking ship of fiat currency and onto the lifeboat of real value. And from that lifeboat, you can acquire the resources that will define your future. To help readers see how real this is, I point to a simple fact. Governments and central banks themselves are preparing for the transition. They may not say it openly, but their actions speak loudly. Nations around the world are accumulating gold at the fastest pace in modern history. China, Russia, India, Turkey, and many others are expanding their reserves, reducing reliance on the US dollar, and signaling a move toward a new financial order. When the largest economic players on Earth quietly shift from fiat to hard assets, it is not a coincidence, it is a warning. I also explore the geopolitical implications of this transition. Monetary shifts have always been accompanied by political and social upheaval. As fiat currencies weaken, nations begin to reposition themselves for the next global system. Alliances shift, trade relationships change, and power structures realign. The coming transition will not be purely financial. It will reshape global influence. And once again, the nations with the strongest backing of real assets will emerge in the most stable position. Part 3 emphasizes that this moment in history is unique. Never before have all major currencies been fiat at the same time. Never before has every industrialized nation carried such immense debt. Never before have central banks coordinated money printing on a global scale. And never before have people placed so much trust in digital numbers that can vanish with a keystroke. Because the entire system is synchronized, its failure or transformation will also be synchronized. This gives the coming wealth transfer a scale far larger than anything seen in the past. But I do not present this future to inspire fear. I present it to empower you. The individuals who recognize the signs early have a once-in-a-generation chance to protect themselves and even thrive. The strategy is simple. Move away from paper assets that rely on promises and toward assets that rely on physics, scarcity, and reality. Gold and silver require no trust. They require no government. They cannot be printed, devalued, or defaulted on. They are the ultimate counterweight to a failing monetary system. I also explained that understanding the timing of the pendulum is crucial. You do not need to predict the exact moment of transition. You only need to recognize that the system is approaching its breaking point. When central banks are forced to choose between deflationary collapse and massive inflation, they will always choose inflation, because inflation hides the pain. But inflation, taken too far, destroys currency completely. That is the point where the pendulum snaps back. Toward the end of Part 3, I talk about the golden castle, the metaphorical stronghold built by those who prepare. For anyone who positions themselves early, gold and silver become not just protection, but opportunity. When the pendulum swings back, when confidence in fiat evaporates, and when new monetary standards are introduced, those who hold real assets will find themselves in the strongest position possible. They will be able to convert their metals into land, businesses, and productive assets at the moment those assets become historically undervalued. Part 3 concludes with a clear message. The future is not something to fear. It is something to understand. We stand at the edge of a major global financial reset, one that will redistribute wealth on a scale not seen in generations. Those who cling to fiat currency will be swept away by inflation, banking failures, and market turmoil. But those who understand history, recognize the signs, and position themselves in gold and silver will not just survive, they will be the new foundation of prosperity in the world that emerges afterward. Part 4. How to invest, building a safe, smart, and strategic foundation in precious metals. In Part IV, I shift from explaining the past, present, and future of the monetary system to guiding you through what to actually do about it. Understanding history and recognizing the fragile nature of today's financial world is essential, but preparation requires action. This final section is designed to help you build a solid, intelligent, and long-term strategy for investing in gold and silver. And I want to be clear from the beginning, investing in precious metals is not about gambling or chasing quick profits. It is about building financial protection, stability, and freedom. I open this part by addressing the most common mistakes people make when they first approach gold and silver. Many newcomers buy with the wrong expectation. They hope metals will make them rich overnight. But gold and silver are not meant to be fast growth assets. Their true power lies in preserving purchasing power while fiat money loses value. When currencies fall, metals appear to rise, but they are simply exposing the weakness of the system. Investing in gold and silver requires patience, discipline, and a clear understanding that these metals are financial anchors, not lottery tickets. Another common mistake is purchasing the wrong types of products. In the metals market, not all gold and silver are equal. Many companies sell collectible coins, special editions, or numismatic pieces with high premiums, meaning you pay far above the metal's actual value. These items may look attractive, but they are poor choices for preserving wealth because their resale value depends on collector interest, not metal content. That is why I stress the importance of focusing on bullion products, standard bars, and widely recognized coins like American Eagles, Maple Leafs, Philharmonics, and simple silver rounds. Bullion gives you the most metal for your money and the most liquidity when you need to sell. From there, I move into one of the most important themes of this section, trusting the right dealers. Because precious metals are physical assets, you must know who you are buying from. There are dishonest sellers who overcharge, mislead, or even sell counterfeit products. I encourage readers to choose reputable dealers with strong track records, transparent pricing, clear product descriptions, and excellent customer feedback. Precious metals are a long-term investment. You need long-term partners, not opportunistic middlemen. After helping readers avoid pitfalls, I turn to the deeper, more strategic question: who are you as an investor? Before you buy anything, you must understand your financial personality, risk tolerance, time horizon, and goals. Are you young and building wealth, nearing retirement and seeking safety, supporting a family and needing liquidity? Your strategy should match your life situation. Precious metals are flexible enough to fit many roles, but you must be honest with yourself before you commit. Once you understand your financial identity, you can build a personalized allocation plan. I explain that many investors benefit from dividing their portfolio into 3 layers: cash and liquidity for emergencies and everyday needs, growth assets, stocks, businesses, real estate, protection assets, gold and silver. Precious metals belong in the 3rd layer, the foundation that remains stable when the other layers are shaking. The exact percentage you allocate depends on your circumstances, but the principle remains. Every strong financial house needs a foundation of real money. From here, I dive into the practical details of acquiring physical metals. I encourage owning real, tangible metal rather than paper substitutes like ETFs, futures, or unallocated accounts. Paper metals depend on third parties, can be leveraged, and may not represent real metal in the event of a crisis. Physical gold and silver cannot be hacked, corrupted, or printed. They exist outside the digital financial system, providing a level of independence that no paper asset can match. But owning physical metals comes with responsibilities, and I guide readers through the available storage methods. Home storage offers control and instant access, but requires proper security, safes, alarms, and discretion. Bank safe deposit boxes provide professional protection, but can be limited during bank holidays or crises. Private vaulting services offer top-tier security and insurance, but at an annual fee. Each option has pros and cons, which I outline to help readers choose based on their needs and holdings. I then address one of the questions I hear most often: when should I buy? Many people worry about buying at the wrong time. But gold and silver investing is not about timing the market. It's about building a store of value that remains strong across cycles. To help avoid emotional buying or hesitation, I recommend strategies like dollar cost averaging, buying small, consistent amounts on a regular schedule. This removes the pressure of picking the perfect moment and builds a strong position over time without stress. Next, I discuss the role of gold and silver during a financial crisis. When the system becomes unstable, when inflation spikes, banks falter, or markets panic, metals act as a stabilizer for your wealth. They gain value not because they change, but because everything else changes around them. When uncertainty rises, metals rise as well. And when the financial system resets, as it always does eventually, holders of gold and silver are in a position of extraordinary strength. This leads into one of the most powerful advantages of owning precious metals: the opportunity they create after a monetary reset. Historically, after currencies collapse or governments revalue money, gold and silver dramatically increase in purchasing power. Land, homes, businesses, and productive assets become incredibly cheap relative to metal. This creates a once-in-a-generation chance to trade metals for undervalued real assets, not to speculate, but to rebuild a strong and lasting financial foundation. Precious metals are therefore not the end of the journey, but the bridge to new opportunities. As the section progresses, I remind readers that the goal is not to hoard gold or silver indefinitely. The goal is to hold real money while fiat currencies weaken, and later convert that real money into productive assets when the pendulum swings back. Those who understand this cycle will be ready to acquire valuable resources at prices unthinkable during the bubble phase of the economy. I conclude Part 4 with the message that investing in gold and silver is ultimately about freedom. Freedom from the instability of fiat currency, freedom from government mismanagement, freedom from systemic risk, freedom from the illusion that numbers on a screen represent real wealth. Gold and silver give you sovereignty in a world where most financial systems are built on fragile trust. They are the only assets that have survived every crisis, every collapse, every war, and every misuse of power throughout history. Part 4 is the roadmap, the practical playbook that enables you to take everything learned in earlier sections and translate it into action. You now understand why metals matter, how the world is shifting, and what role precious metals play in the next stage of the monetary cycle. With that understanding, you can build a strategy that protects your family, strengthens your future, and positions you to thrive during the greatest financial transition of the 21st century.